Hello everyone, my name is M.Afsan and welcome to the XAT preparation strategy video. So before moving on with the video, I would like to clear a misconception that most of the students have. So most of the students think that you have to be a genius so as to crack this exam. So what I believe is that this exam is nothing special and you have to have the right strategy as well as be ready to work hard so as to crack this exam. I would be teaching you what is the strategy that needs to be employed as well as what is the test taking strategy you have to use so as to get good marks in your exam. So this is my XAT scorecard. I scored an overall percentile of 99.31 with the following percentiles in different sections. So 93 percentile in quant, 96 in verbal and 99 in decision making. So moving on, that exam has 4 sections. The first one being quant, second verbal and logical ability, third one decision making, and the last is GK. So it's a 3-hour paper with the first 2 hours and 45 minutes exclusively for the first 3 sections. At the end of these 2 hours and 45 minutes, the first 3 sections get logged and you would not be able to access any of these at the end of 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the last 15 minutes is exclusively for your GK section. Keep in mind that your GK scores are not taken into account while calculating the final percentile. Even though they do not take this into account, do not neglect this section. So what is special about the XAT exam is that there is no sectional timing or sectional time limit for any of these sections, that is quant, verbal and decision making. You are free to juggle between these sections in the 2 hours and 45 minutes given to you. So this brings in many challenges. The first being that you have to clear the cutoffs for each of these sections. The second being that you have to score as high as possible in sections where you are good at. This will ensure you get a very high percentile overall. This was the broad strategy that I adopted to score good marks in my XAT exam. Coming to the marking scheme, there are 3 types of marking structures I can say in the XAT exam. The first is +1 for every correct answer, -0.25 for wrong answers, and the third one being -0.1 for every additional unattempted question beyond 8 unattempted questions. So this sounds a bit tricky, so I would be explaining this using an example. Consider that you have 28 questions in total and you attempt 10 questions. So you attempt 10 questions. So there remains 18 unattempted questions. So this criteria says that beyond so every unattempted question beyond 8 unattempted questions carries a negative marking of -0.1. So -8 from this and you get 10. So 10 into -0.1. -0.1 gives you -1. So if you consider the magnitude of this negative marking, this is very less when compared to the magnitude of negative marking for wrong answers. So I would suggest that you completely neglect this type of negative marking, because this will just increase the pressure on you during the exam. Just neglect the third part of negative marking and concentrate on the first 2, that is +1 for correct and -0.25 for wrong answers. Coming to the strategy part. So my target was to score an overall percentile of 95 and above, and to get a percentile of 95 and above I had to score a minimum of 33 or 34. So why 95 percentile? So 95 percentile was the minimum percentile required to get a call for business management course, for an interview for the business management course at XLRI. So I started off with collecting the data about the sectional cutoffs for each of these sections. So I concluded that the maximum cutoff for the VA section in the past 10 years was 8. So the maximum cutoff for VA was 8, for QA it was 10, and for decision making it was 9. Knowing the cutoffs for each of these, I came up with the safe number of attempts, such that even if 1 or 2 questions go wrong, I would have safely crossed the cutoff for each of these sections. As I said before, you would get 2 hours and 45 minutes for attempting these 3 sections. So 2 hours and 45 minutes is 165 minutes. So when you divide 165 by 3, you get 55 minutes. As I said before, my broad strategy was to ensure that I just clear the cutoffs in section where I was weak at, and try to boost my overall score in sections where I was strong at. So my strong sections were QA as well as decision making, and verbal ability was my weak section. So what I did was that I allotted 40 minutes to each of these sections, that is 40, 40 and 40 minutes. As soon as I was able to finish the safe number of questions in each of these sections, I immediately moved on to the next section. So at the end of 120 minutes, 40 plus 40 and 40 gives us 120. So at the end of 120 minutes, I had an additional 45 minutes. So I used this additional 45 minutes in solving extra QA questions as well as decision making questions. So I was able to boost my scores in QA as well as DM sections. But make sure that you are dynamic during your exam, and you are ready to change your strategy as and when required, because I was able to solve more than 12 questions within 40 minutes. So I did not go ahead and solve more QA questions at that point of time. I immediately moved on to the decision making section, because my priority was to clear the cutoff initially and later on come back to the section and solve more questions. Coming to the verbal and logical ability section, it is similar to your VA-RC section of CAT, but there are a few differences here. The first one being that along with the inference-based RCs, there are also lengthy RCs with direct questions as well as poems. So be ready to tackle such questions. And moreover, there is increased emphasis on VA questions here, like vocabulary, analogy, parajumbles, etc. As I said before, my strength was not particularly in verbal and logical ability section, so I tried to play safe here. I just wanted to clear the cutoffs. So comparing the VA questions as well as RC questions, I was much more comfortable attempting VA questions. So I planned to clear the cutoff by answering VA questions as much as possible. So I attempted 5 to 6 VA questions with utmost confidence. So this ensured that I had to attempt very less RC questions there. So moving on with the RCs, what I did was that I scanned through all the RC questions quickly and identified any brownie questions there. For example, there were questions where they would ask you meanings of words. So this did not require you to go through the entire passage. So such questions are brownies, and if you answer such questions, it will surely help in boosting your overall percentile. So I identified such questions initially and answered them as soon as possible. So after that, I identified one RC passage which I could solve completely. So I did that and quickly moved on to the next section. Coming to the quantitative ability section, so this section has 28 questions overall. This section was one of my strengths and I wanted to attempt as many problems as possible. So if you consider the QA section of CAT to that of XAT, the level of difficulty of questions in CAT is in the range of easy to moderate, mostly, while that of XAT is in the range of moderate to hard. So I would suggest that when you are preparing for a CAT exam, solve questions of all difficulty levels, that is easy, moderate as well as hard. Do not neglect the hard questions while you are preparing for your CAT exam. So as I said before, I attempted close to 12 questions within 30 minutes and immediately moved on to the DM section, because my priority was to first clear the cutoffs, and I later came back to this section and solved more questions so as to boost my overall percentile. The last section is the decision making section. So this section is considered to be the toughest section by many of the students, and I also felt the same way initially. That was because I was not able to understand the answers that were being given for the questions. So what I did was that I collected the last 10 years question papers along with many mock papers and started attempting the decision making questions. When I got most of the answers wrong, I started analyzing the reasoning behind the answers given. So once I identified the reasoning being given, I was able to answer most of the questions in this section. So that is how I was able to score a percentile of 99.45 in this section in particular. So I would suggest you to solve as many mock papers as possible so as to crack this section. Come to the end of the video, guys. So if you like the video, give a thumbs up and like this video. As soon as this video reaches 5,000 likes, I would be making a video on how to analyze the answers of decision making. That would be very helpful for you to crack this section. So thank you, guys.